Okay. Today's date is the 3rd November 2014. This is to figure span survey, and I'm going to conduct the speaking test. First of all, to help you settle down, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Can you first tell me your full official name?
My name is Dibyatanay, as stated in the official passport, but I prefer people calling me Dibu.
Okay. Mr. Dibu, are you a student or you're doing a job?
I'm a student, and I'm currently doing my A-levels from Student Grammar School. I'll be taking my A-levels in June 2015, which is next year.
Where are you from?
I live in Jamal Khan in a 5-story building, and I live on the 3rd floor. And Jamal Khan is a few minutes drive from here, very close.
Okay. Do you like the neighborhood?
I certainly do love the neighborhood I live in. Firstly, it's a very clean neighborhood. Jamal Khan is known as the healthy ward of the city. So there are also a lot of facilities available within close reach. For example, I have hospitals, I have a number of one-stop shops in my locality, and there's also good transport facilities available in my neighborhood.
Did you notice any disadvantages of living over the place?
Well, the neighborhood I live in is quite pleasant, and I don't have many complaints about the neighborhood. But yes, there is one thing I would like to change, which is the number of schools in my neighborhood. There are too many schools in my neighborhood, so it can get crowded during school hours at times.
Is there any part of the house you're living in is very disgusting to you?
Well, the house I live in is very pleasant as well. I really like my building, and I really like the whole environment. But there is one thing which doesn't seem very fitting to me in this house, which is that there is a dustbin very close to my house. And sometimes during holidays, especially when the city corporation fails to clean the garbage, it can get...
Can you describe the kitchen or cooking space where you live?
My kitchen is normally larger than what you would expect in most apartments today. It has a tiled floor, and there is the stove is on the corner, and a number of shelves line the upper walls, and there's also a balcony attached to the kitchen which overlooks this street. So it's a very good kitchen by standard.
Who does the cooking in your house?
Most of the cooking in my house is done by my mother. She cooks most of the time, and although she is a doctor and finds very little time in the day for activities like cooking, she still needs to cook. Before, when my grandmother was alive, she used to cook her own food, and since she was a vegetarian, she used to cook most of the vegetables that we used to.
How do you try and stay healthy with your food habits?
I would not say I make a very conscious effort to stay healthy with my food habit, but yes, there are certain things that I try to stick to and that have become a habit. The first thing is I avoid most of the cold drinks that are available. For example, Coke, Pepsi, or any other drink. And another thing is, as a family, we like to use sunflower oil in our cooking, because sunflower oil, is low on cholesterol, so it helps keep us healthier than normal oil.
Okay, let's talk about eating out. Do you like the experience of eating out at a restaurant?
Yes, I definitely love the experience of eating out. It's one of the favorite pastimes for me, and I usually love to eat out on holidays. I think eating out is necessary to overcome the mundane food that normally gets served at homes, and it can become quite boring to eat at home always. And
right. Which do you prefer, eating at a restaurant or eating at a friend's house?
I think I prefer eating at a friend's house more than eating at a restaurant, because both of them are in one sense eating out. But when you're eating at a friend's house, there's a more comfortable zone, and you get to interact with friends on a more personal level. than when eating at a restaurant.
What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of eating at a restaurant?
I think the major advantage of eating at a restaurant is not having to cook, because most people live very busy lives these days, and they find little time to cook their own meals. Another advantage is that the food often tastes better than what is cooked at home. So it can bring a variety in our daily meals. A major disadvantage of food at restaurants is we cannot be sure about the hygiene. And there have been reports of many restaurants not adhering to hygiene rules.
What are the attitude toward tipping in a restaurant in your country?
Tipping at restaurants is a very common practice in my country. It is general for customers to tip the waiters who have been serving them when they leave. The amount of tips given can vary from place to place. Usually, if customers are at a high-end hotel or restaurant where service offered is very good, then the amount of tip given might be a lot more than what would normally be given at a lower or cheaper restaurant in the country.
Okay, let's talk about hotels. Do you like to stay in hotels?
Staying in hotels is in fact a very favorite activity of mine, mainly because it gives you a great place to relax. I also like to stay in hotels because you don't need to do many of the things that you would have to do at home, many of the chores that you would need to do. And lots of things you can gain much more easily when staying in hotels.
Can you describe the best hotels you have ever stayed in?
Well, let's see. I have had the fortune of staying at a number of hotels in my life. But I guess I would say that the best hotel that I've stayed in is Park Hotel in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. The hotel we stayed in, it was a luxury suite hotel, and there were a number of facilities which you may not find in a more common hotels. For example, there were gyms, there was definitely a swimming pool, there were saunas, and places where you could just relax apart from the lobby itself.
Can you compare the worst hotel you've been in?
The worst hotel. The only thing that comes to my mind about worst hotel must be the hotel in Dhaka that I had to live in when I was traveling to Malaysia itself. It was a hotel near the airport, and we had to stay there because we couldn't go far from the airport as our flights would be early in the morning next day. So it was a very shabby hotel. The rooms were not well maintained at all. And another thing that I disliked was that it did not have 24-hour food service. So by the time we arrived at around 10 at night, the restaurant was closed and we had to spend the rest of the night eating biscuits. So that was quite not good.
What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of staying in a hotel?
Well, as I've said, the main advantage of staying in a hotel is that you can get many of the things done by the hotel staff. You don't have to do many of the chores like waking up early in the morning and doing your bed or washing your clothes by yourself. These services are normally provided by hotels themselves. Another great thing about hotels is the food. You can get food which can be delivered to your room, or if you like, you can go downstairs. You can go to the restaurant, which is usually located downstairs, and you can have the food there. So there are many other advantages.
Do you think the hotels are overpriced?
Well, at times, my experience has made me feel that hotels are overpriced. For instance, this hotel I was talking about in Dhaka, near the airport, the daily price there was 3,000 taka per night, which is quite exorbitant when you compare it with many of the 4-star hotels you'd normally find in tourist places like Cox's Bazar. You can stay in many 4-star hotels for 4,000 or even less than 4,000 per night. But in that very shabby and dilapidated hotel itself, the daily rate was 3,000 taka. So that was quite higher than
Thank you
what-
very much. Now I'm going to give you a card. On the card you'll find a topic and you'll also find some guiding questions. Based on that, you have to prepare a talk for 1 minute and you have 1 minute time to take notes. Here's the topic. Here's the topic and basically you can use this map. Let's start now.
Yes, sure.
Carry on.
The airport that I would like to talk about is Changi Airport in Singapore. I visited Changi Airport when I was on a transit from Dhaka to Australia. I was visiting my uncle in Sydney during my summer vacation. Changi Airport is ranked one of the best airports in the world in terms of both the number of passengers it receives as well as the service it provides. There were a number of things to do at Changi Airport. I had to wait there for about 6 hours, and I thought I'd be spending a very boring time, but in fact, I never realized how quickly time had passed when I was at Changi Airport. There were a large number of food cafes and restaurants, much more than you'd normally expect to find at airports, and we spent a lot of time tasting different types of foods at these restaurants. And there were also foods from different nations because there would be passengers from different countries. Another interesting thing that we did was travel around from one terminal to another. There are train services, LRT services, which take you from one terminal to another, and you can go to the duty-free shops in different terminals, which provide a good place for shopping lovers. My experience at Changi Airport was a great one, mainly because of the friendliness of the staff there. Normally at airports, passengers would be intimidated by the security staff because they might ask questions which passengers might feel uncomfortable about. But these staff at Changi Airport were very friendly and perfectly well disciplined. And my grandmother was traveling along with us, and they were very helpful with her because she had to be carried on a wheelchair. And helped us a lot with that.
What is the worst airport in your life?
The worst airport in my life, sadly, would be the airport, Dhaka Airport itself. Now, the first problem with Dhaka Airport is that it's quite small for the number of passengers it receives. So at times it can get very crowded and very difficult to get around in that airport. Another problem is that since there are this huge load of passengers, this airport staff there may not be always friendly with you, and you may find it difficult dealing with their questions, and sometimes you may even have to go through extra security checks, which may seem a hassle to you.
Right. Okay, let's talk about the plane travel. Can you explain why there is so much more air travel nowadays?
Well, the obvious reason that air traveling has increased these days is that you can get to different places very quickly. For example, in the old days when air travel was not available, if you wanted to go from Asia to, say, America, you would need to take a ship, and that would probably take you around 1 month, and it would also be a very tiring journey. Air travel has the advantage that it is both a short journey and it can be very comfortable compared to traditional methods. Another advantage of air travel is that it allows you to be more flexible in terms of choice of locations. There are more air routes than there are shipping routes.
Right. Do you think the rise of the budget airline is a good bad thing for our society?
Well, budget airlines have brought down air travel prices and made it possible for a larger number of people to use air travel, but I personally think it has brought about a negative impact on the airline industry. Budget airlines, when they try to reduce the airfares, they often end up compromising many of the services that passengers normally expect from an airline. For example, you don't get food even on long journeys, and even if food is sold on board, it's often at a very high rate, which may not be accessible to all. And another problem is that budget airlines often require you to check in online, which can be a very difficult experience for first-time travelers.
Right. So, can you predict what changes might occur in the airline industry over the next 50 years?
Well, I see some very positive changes coming up ahead in the future in this airline industry. The first, I must say, is the increase in security. With the worldwide threat of terrorism now gripping the airport industry, and the recent disappearances of two Malaysian Airlines flights, the security measures have been beefed up a lot, and I believe the security measures will improve further in the future. Another aspect of airline travel that may improve is the enjoyable factor. For example, recently I was reading a newspaper report in which it stated that an airline has been developed which has no windows. So it's basically a transparent airline, and it improves the entire experience of flying because you don't get bored.
What are some of the main dangers of air travel?
Well, firstly, the main danger of air travel is that you are traveling at a very high altitude, so if an emergency situation occurs on board, then you have very little ability to control that. For example, if a person falls ill on board, although the airline staff are trained to handle small emergency situations, if it's a large disaster, or if it's a healthcare break collapse that cannot be handled on board, then there's little we can do about that patient or that person. And another definite risk is the threat of terrorism. Airlines have become major targets for most terrorist organizations, and since airlines, the pilots can be maneuvered very easily at high altitudes, it's a very easy target for terrorist attacks.
Okay, let's discuss something about fossil fuels. What impact will the unsustainable use of fossil fuels have on the airline industry?
Well, the airline industry is very dependent on fossil fuels. It uses jet fuel, which is the only type of fuel that can be used on airlines. So if we continue this unsustainable use of fossil fuels, what will happen is that the number of airline flights will have to be reduced, or the airfare might increase to cater to the demands of the passengers. And this will bring about a negative impact because there will be fewer people who will be able to access airfares, and it will reverse the decades of growth that the airline industry has witnessed.
What do you feel are the best alternative options to fossil fuels in your country?
In the context of my country, the best alternative to fossil fuels would be hydroelectric power. Bangladesh is a riverine country. There are a lot of rivers, and so if we can harness tidal power and hydroelectric power properly, then I think we'll be able to make our demands quite successfully. And to a smaller extent, I think solar power could also be of great help, especially in localized situations and in small communities and villages which are inaccessible.
Can you compare the advantages and disadvantages of wind power and hydroelectric power?
Yes, surely. The major advantage of hydroelectric power over wind power would be that it's a continuous source of power and it's a very reliable source of power. Wind may not always be available, so you cannot guarantee that wind power will sustain a neighborhood or community. But what hydroelectric power is always available and can be controlled to meet our demands. So that's one great advantage. A disadvantage of hydroelectric power will be that large dams need to be built, which will be very expensive in the long run. And these dams often block out sediments which are carried by the rivers. And since these sediments cannot be deposited at the delta, many wading birds will lose their habitats. That's one disadvantage. For windmills, for wind powers as well, there's another disadvantage that it often occupies a very large space, which could have been better put to use in other tasks like agriculture.
How can an individual make a difference to the unsustainable use of fossil fuels?
I believe there's a lot that we can do on the individual level to reduce this unsustainable use of fossil fuels. The first thing that we must realize is that the electricity that we take for granted comes from these fossil fuels. Most power stations run on fossil fuels. So we must learn to use electricity wisely. For example, simple everyday habits such as turning off the lights or fans when we leave a room will, in the long run, provide a great boost to the fossil fuel reserves that we currently have. And another important aspect of individual efforts should be carpooling. Most people nowadays have their private cars, at least in the developed countries. So it would be advisable if colleagues working in the same workplace could use a common car to commute to their workplaces instead of using their individual cars. That would help save fuel.
Thank you very much. Your class is over.
You're welcome.